Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Eastham Zoning Task Force meeting. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access TV, local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. Thank you. Carolyn circulated some minutes. Did everyone have a chance to take a peek at them? An extra copy if anyone needs. I'll take these. Thank you. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes? Second. Any comment? No? All in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you. The minutes are set.
Thank you, Karen.
So, we have, I'm going to turn this over to Paul. He's gotten feedback from town council and certain other things, so certain other folks, so without further ado.
You want to go over it form base first?
Sure, whatever is, what do you have on this? Is it the draft bylaw?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and should I still send us some really good news? Yes, town council has said we don't have to put the whole zoning code in the warrant,
We don't.
just the exception.
Wow, it's gonna save a few trees, huh?
Just the change,
Pages maybe?
maybe 40 pages, yeah.
No,
that's-
we don't have to put, we don't have to put it in.
We don't have to know
We don't have to put any of it in.
any of it in, what? Oh.
We just do a summarized explanation of the changes and then refer to the documents. And that's what
That makes sense.
Jackie's trying to figure out how we can, if we want to do any supplemental information, but that decision's still pending with what Jackie wants to do with the warrant, but technically we don't have to put
Anything in?
any of it other than a generalized explanation that the whole bylaw is being reworked. And so I have a 1-paragraph summary.
Well, that's good because on first impressions, you had the whole thing is gonna scare the crap out of people. You're gonna get no votes just on that.
But you know, I mean, I'm thrilled. I'm a little concerned with 1 paragraph.
Yeah, that's
It feels like 1 paragraph with maybe followed by a bunch of bullets.
I think
to highlight.
you're also. Speak before I even thought about it, but I would include at least a couple of diagrams, like identifying, like a picture identifying scope. Because that's what I've been hearing people talk about.
The map, so a map.
Yeah, just the map that says this is the limited scope of where we are.
Yeah, we
People are
have-
thinking these things are just.
We have the map in there.
Yeah, I think it's hard because as soon as you start to include anything, it's like, do you make it more important than anything else that's in the bylaw change? It's a real, I think, careful choice between what you include and what you don't include, because if you don't include something and somebody comes up to you, you know, a month after the town meetings and, well, it wasn't in the warrant, you know, the other things were in the warrant, I like them, but this I didn't like and I didn't see it, it wasn't in the warrant. I think you have to be really careful about what you include and what you don't.
Yeah.
So that you don't appear to be being selective and
What
biased.
do we do in the case of someone who knows out there, someone who might have some angst with some dimension in our table or something, that wants to come and make an amendment? It's out of the blue. What would we be doing? You know, someone says, you know, a table
Nobody in the audience.
3.5, you know, I
On
don't like
page
the picture
72,
of this. I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, just,
Have
you
to
gotta
handle
deal with it, you gotta handle it. I mean,
Try and explain it as best you can.
so that, I say, I haven't,
Maybe what I would suggest is that you have 40 or 50 copies, full copies at town meeting. So if something like that happens, you can say, for anyone who didn't pick up a copy of the full literature, it's up here at the front desk. At least you'd have that as a
40 or
backup.
50 of this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because if otherwise people are like looking on their phones or, you know, they can't debate anything, but at least if if that did happen. You'd have a way forward by saying, okay, come on up, pick up. And after people see the threat of.
Yeah.
You're right, it doesn't make any sense to just. Try to make.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean. To discuss it with Jackie and the town, it's ultimately up to the select board and Jackie and the town moderator. Actually, town moderator has the final say on that, but
Is that still Scott?
Well, would it make sense, and is there a way to have a PowerPoint or something that has everything? So that in case,
yeah, we could do that. I had thought about that. I have to ask Jackie what the
Just- yeah.
logistics are.
Yeah.
If we're gonna be in the auditorium at the new high school, so I
Yeah.
don't know if we're gonna have screens and all that things set up, so that's an option also. We can,
In the auditorium, not the
yeah,
gym?
it's gonna be in the auditorium, yeah.
Oh, awesome.
I haven't seen it.
I
Have
think
you
that
seen
would
it?
draw. See,
Just out of
I wanna
curiosity.
see
See it, yeah.
That could be a bad thing.
No, I think it'd be good.
I agree, more people's good thing.
Yeah, I think work out a plan with the moderator and town
Yeah.
council. or-
For the record, it's been on the website for weeks. It's been in the paper. It's been on social media. We printed the entire bylaw in the legal ad, 2.5 full pages twice.
Yeah, that
Oh,
would,
really?
Yes, at significant cost.
Yeah, the province
But I
come
put it-
independent. it's
I
probably
put the
better.
entire thing in the newspaper for 2 weeks, so
Wow.
it's out there in its entirety.
Just to weigh in one more thing. I don't think I would bring like 30 or 40 copies and have them. Because then you got some have, some don't. I don't think that's a good idea.
I think
you either
having,
have it for everybody or you don't.
if we have this set up that we can bring it up on a screen, and if someone has a very specific question.
It's there for
I
everyone
think
to
so.
read.
I think that makes sense. It's just,
Well,
as long as the logistics of the meeting. And so I don't know what the setup is gonna be. This will be a new deal, so I haven't had discussions about that yet.
we need to make a point at the planning board public hearing to talk about this. And highlight this because certainly at the community meeting, we were kind of explicit that they would see the whole thing marked up. Before town council weighed in. I mean, maybe it's only 20 people, but I think we said that.
Right.
But that can also be in the warrant where you refer to how to find it on the.
Oh, I know, but no, but we told them we said you're gonna get an 80-page document, which was what
Right.
happened last time and what we've been advised up until last week.
And the warrant, yeah, and the warrant's available before town meeting,
And
so.
will the warrant have the whole shebang? in it?
At this point, I don't believe
No.
they're gonna
No.
print the whole thing in the warrant.
All right. Let's go to the discussion of, so Carolyn has done her full review. And I think Paul is making comments based on Carolyn's full review. As well as,
Back up, just 1 second.
Okay.
To the map.
to the map,
No, keep going. There. It's still wrong.
yeah, maps,
It's still on it's OR instead of TC.
is that changeable, Paul?
I know, it's just, the label is moved over a little bit. The coloration is the right color, it's just the
Right.
OR is in the wrong spot.
Was that one? Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
The lot behind it is
Oh.
still
The
OR.
that's a lot for
Okay,
sale, right?
great. Thank you.
Yes,
That lot's for sale?
Of course, last time, like 6 months ago.
yeah. There's a lot of,
But
got a
that-
lot of phone calls about it.
It's right behind.
And Nickerson, not looking to buy it? You should sell it as a package and,
No,
Oh,
it's
two different
behind,
sites.
it's
Behind
behind
the
the
gas
shelf.
Michelle,
oh, it's by
Yeah.
the Shell station.
off of,
It's a wooded lot too, I think.
off of Oak Street.
Yeah.
Be good investment.
All right, so I'll just go through some changes and some questions since the last time. So. I recommend that we take commercial out of this. For commercial farm, we added this in, I think when Ted was working with us because we were trying to get more specific about definitions and things. The reason commercial farms have certain protections that we actually can't prohibit them, but I think if we add this in here, we're just calling attention to something that isn't worth it, to be honest with you. Like right now in the bylaw, it just says farm. And they're allowed anyways, everywhere except core commercial, but it's just one thing that I don't think it's critical. And if we're just calling attention to something that
I agree.
it'll cause more problems and questions. Tiny house. What's this change?
Isn't that a definitional change?
Well, it was that, so the seasonal communities allows us to put restrictions in for year-round housing. We're gonna have to put, this is a change for other parts of the bylaw later on. We'll have to address tiny houses, but put it in here now so we don't have to undo this part. So, but this would be, we're allowing tiny houses, but designated for year-round use. So similar approach to what we're trying to do with the year-round rental thing.
How do we regulate that? Like if someone goes to Florida for 5 months, that counts as a year round. So is it just that the house has to be built to year round standards, like it's not, you know,
Yeah.
turning up?
We can't get a short-term rental.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Yes, you could, doesn't mean you have to live in it full-time year-round, you could.
Why don't we just say they can't be used for short-term rentals? I think that's the intent, why would we just? That's what caused confusion to me, as people get like, oh, I'd buy it, but I like to spend 4 months in Florida, so I
Yeah.
can't buy the slot. I mean, it's misinformation, but.
Right, well, I can think through what the better way to phrase that is.
Yeah.
This is not any change to the content, but I just reworded it. This is the waiver. So we have the carve out so that you can not have to do a front lot building if you're a certain way back. I just reworded it so that it's clear that the waiver is from the requirement to construct the building. There was a question about, should this be referring to a table on one of the dimensional charts, and that's not. So I just try to reword it, so it's really just.
That's good.
So this is the chart that deals with the limits on the unit sizes and the overall averages in the buildings. Change this note to explain that sites with multiple buildings, it's based on the cumulative average, which we actually had that language already, but it was just referring to the cottage port development. And then we realized that
Makes sense.
Still haven't found anything better here. Not too many changes. Just a couple slight, this was a slight change in the bicycle parking section. Just clarifying that so this is requiring at least one bike parking space for 5 or more residential units, so that it can be in a common parking area. They may be, you have to accommodate it if you want to put one bike at each building site or not. And then we took out, there was a line in there about requiring that the bike's storage area be covered structure. It just gonna lead to weird little structures and coverings and things that actually aren't gonna do any good, because unless you're putting it in a closed shed, it's still, bikes are still in the weather.
Yeah, and you see, I know Somerville, a lot of city urban environments, they oftentimes will have these huge bike racks and they contract with some company to provide rental bikes for people to get around instead of using cars. They got no sheds, nothing like that.
Yeah,
It's just a
it's
small
that-
series of bike racks and they're wet,
Yeah.
there's snow on there.
So, yeah, I took that out.
Mhm.
You can certainly do that if you want, but we're not requiring they have to. This was just repeated, language, so it's still in a subsequent section. I took it out, it's repeated. Oh, that, I forgot to take, this is duplicating. That's why it's red.
Yeah.
I just need to take
I was
that.
wondering where the red came in.
Yeah,
Last time, I
this-
was like,
that
oh,
was,
Really want to emphasize.
that line
It really doesn't like Tyler.
It's red.
That's right.
Go in and
Red,
play
we
with the
don't
table.
want them.
that's coming out.
And I had to figure out what the SDL stood for,
And then I
simulated.
did put in, so I'm taking this out and we're putting in this one under prohibited, just so that it matches the formatting, so
What is this?
casement, single
Simulated.
simulated divided light.
It's,
So it's the
Mullions.
Got it.
mullions are
Yeah,
in
yeah.
between, you know.
But does it require that you have to have mullions, like if you have case, I read this, that if you have casement windows, you can't just have. Plain casement windows, you have to have the dividers.
So the way this is saying is that casement windows with the divider lights
You can't just
are,
have a plain casement.
this would prohibit them.
That's Cape Cod Colonial Field.
Except for in the trade park.
I thought this said you could do it with, special permit.
You can have.
All it
case-
says with planning group approval is only in the park. Only, even if you're doing it in the trade park, you need to have special permission.
I think that was,
Comfortable with all of
I
this?
think that was more than, that was more of just anything in the special, in the trade park, just to. Given that there's, whether it's top of the shop, there's just so many things. I think we threw a lot of things in special permit in trade park. I don't think we were focused so much on the windows.
I'm just thinking about tea time, for example. And I don't think it would be inappropriate for in the housing product tea time that's in the back. For there to be windows that don't have the SDLs.
I'm not wedded to SDLs. I don't think they are a must have. I mean, I think they're a nice attachment. But
I'd be in
Inappropriate.
favor of making them be on the front of buildings, but
Yeah,
it is a cost. Not a significant cost,
Right.
but
it makes the windows more expensive and, you know, in
it
the,
also ties you into this aesthetic that you have to have this colonial look of buildings, no matter where they are, even
I think it's kind of a dated colonial, actually.
telling me.
Yeah, okay. Well, I know you want to go the other way,
no,
but,
no pun intended.
Yeah. but I think, but I mean, you just you don't see people doing that now in design, even houses that are staying in a traditional.
Well, I'm thinking is if you have a storefront lot, which we require you to have a certain percentage, the storefront has to be glass.
Hmm.
You know, those windows also have to now be
Yeah,
broken down into little 8x, 6x4 brackets. You know,
I'm
you walk by, you know, it looks nice if it's in downtown Chatham, but I'm not sure how it fits in with the modern aesthetic of development stuff.
I would leave it under permitted, but I think I would take that out under prohibited.
I would be fine with that. Yeah.
I would. Say that again?
Take out it's,
Where it's prohibited to have a casement window without the SDL.
I would put it all under planning. I would say it's permitted. If you want to put them in, put them in. But then, under the approval, let it be a case by case. If somebody wants to make the case to say,
I know, but we're trying to. We're trying
I'm
to
not doing
keep,
planning.
well, I mean, they don't want to.
What's that?
They've been historically reluctant to get down into the weeds of this, so I'd rather,
Well. Do we want to even have the window section? At all? Do we want to get into window styles other than maybe? Prohibiting the highly reflective.
Yeah. We obviously know you don't like that.
Well, no, well, this
No, I
came,
know,
this
no,
came from the commission.
I agree with you.
Right.
Right.
I think getting rid of the highly reflective glass makes sense. I would say,
go up above the permitted is, so we get materials and then you double hung. Simulated casement with, those are permitted. I mean,
I guess I'm just wondering if. We don't have to get into regulating window types if we don't want to, other than let's prohibit the things that we think are. Absolutely don't want, just leave it at that, that way this is not an issue. We're not prescribing one thing or another.
so other than highly reflected glass, what kind of windows would we not want to see? What would be,
You got the darker,
The
dark ones, the next.
we've
panel
got
down,
two in there too.
the Dark
The other
tinted
thing is
glass.
that
don't want that.
permitted list, you don't have transoms, picture windows, specialty portal windows.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
A
know those
triangle
might,
window in a dormer.
yeah,
Yeah, those are all good.
those
Get
are,
into a bunch of specialty type of windows.
Yeah.
I think the sliding glass,
Builders.
I think the tinted glass, the sliding glass door, fans all make sense. It's,
So if we kept that as prohibited, then we don't, you could get rid of everything else, so it's just, that way it's. Folks are free to have the windows they
If it's
want.
not prohibited, you can do what you want.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I still think. Anything that's gonna go to planning board, there's still the opportunity to discuss this and work it out if for some reason. It's gonna be an issue. There's still an opportunity to address it at board hearing, even if it's not.
Yeah, here's where actually when the rubber hits the road, I guess start to think, well, geez, because. If it becomes an issue, then you have some attorney says, it's not in your bylaws, read your bylaws.
well, we're not talking about how big those panes have to be, like somebody could say this, okay, just one bar down is a simulated divider. And someone else says, no, they gotta be 6 by 6 squares, like the building.
I think it is getting a little too detailed.
do you
If
think,
we back up to a picture 3 pages up, and you look at the commercial storefront, we're showing windows without one wall. There it is. So if you zoom in on that, those are big plate glass windows.
Yeah.
Without lights.
let me ask you, the double hung windows. Would you want to have some standard so that a housing developer couldn't come in with a cheaper window? I mean, I'm just asking, is there a quality standard here? Because this will apply to not only commercial development, but all the housing.
In terms of if they're vinyl or they're wood frame or they're.
Do we care, do we
But it's,
want,
everything is subject to the mass building codes. Those are gonna cover the. types of
is
windows.
double hung windows a requirement for
No.
energy?
But
purposes?
the R value is,
No,
like the structural integrity and the insulated value, so it's only so cheap you can go on windows before they won't pass that.
I mean, I don't have the answer, I'm just Paul, I'm just sort of raising
I don't think
From-
that's
a housing issue.
no, I don't think that's,
That's, you don't, that's not a tool you want to have in your back pocket to say,
no, because I
This
think
is-
it's gonna be. I don't,
That's a building code.
it's a
but
building code
Okay.
and
They may want to
energy
put it
code.
windows that you and I wouldn't want in our place,
I-
but if it passes.
the building.
Muster with
Mhm.
building code, now we're really getting into it.
So we could do nothing, which we're not gonna do. We could regulate the reflectivity of the glass and the which is.
Tinting and stuff.
Tinting, I agree with that. The next step up would be the frontage of buildings in core commercial. We want the Cape Cod Chatham look. Maybe we put it there, just on the front of buildings that are in that district, so that when you're walking down the street or you're driving down, you're like, oh, that looks. But when you go beyond that, and you're talking about the sides, the back, and you're talking about.
No,
other
I agree.
spaces, now, So,
I was thinking the same thing. I don't think in core commercial along Route 6 or Racket, we would want someone to come in with high energy value, et cetera, but very modern windows. They're slanted, they're odd shapes, they're.
my only point is
Real-
that.
Very,
An Escher window.
yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'm just thinking of the look they're trying to create right along those two areas, but anywhere else,
That across.
And I don't think we wanna be too cute with the colonial look. I mean,
You can overdo that.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so, I mean, it's 2025, this will go into like 2035, 2040. So I would think give people a little more.
Yeah.
Sway.
So under window types, we can just have one line that's the prohibited, which would be highly reflected in the dark tinted.
Yes.
And how
And then
about the
leave it.
sliding glass doors
Oh.
painting?
On sliding glass
Sides,
doors.
yeah, those three.
Those three, and then windows, everything else is,
I think I'd leave
I'm okay
everything
with
else.
Somewhere sliding glass doors aren't prohibited by the building code and fire code. They don't,
Right.
for a commercial establishment, they're almost not. out.
they may be.
Oh, when you're saying sliding glass doors on front facades, is that specific to sliding?
It would also
I think
regulate it if you have a mixed use building and you have an apartment on the ground floor.
Yeah, so if you could have a second floor apartment with a balcony in front and they have a sliding door, now we're saying you can't have a sliding door on that second floor balcony or third floor balcony.
Technically, yeah.
And that might be.
Yeah.
So it's like a.
Yeah.
But anyways,
I think on the commercial stuff, the sliding glass doors, they're not prohibited because they typically require a normal door adjacent to it. So in the case of
So you have
fire,
to
there's a
have-
regular door to get out, the sliding glass is for convenience.
I guess I was thinking of patio doors, manual doors, but you're right. Automatic doors, we don't want the automatic doors.
Yeah, because you could, I mean, you could get a
That's why
restaurant.
CVS will put in the accordion doors like they have in New Orleans.
Yeah.
They're not sliding. Sorry.
Okay, I think we're good, right? You gotta move on. Okay, so we got 3 prohibited, the consensus is, we're gonna leave the regulations about this. Okay, let's kind of. Let's move fast.
Good catch, Paul.
Just minor planting, native Cape Cod species and drought resistant.
Yeah.
Well, so this is the section of formula business. The only thing we had added was this line, which basically these 3 things describe the things that would come into consideration in formula. If we start touching, well, town council said other towns have had issues trying to regulate formula business. We have this, it's on the books. If we add this in, it's calling attention to it, where the AG might look at this whole section and say, oh, wait a minute. So I took this out so that we're not calling attention to it because we don't want to lose your formula business. This line can be inserted further down into the section that talks about general special permit
Mhm.
requirements.
Yeah. It's in there.
So that way it's not affecting.
Yeah, I agree.
Peer review. So we have the 4 items that would require mandatory peer review. My suggestion is that we have a little leeway on the inclusionary. And we're kind of working through this with a few smaller projects now, so it could be somewhat onerous for a local business or local developer who's doing a really small development to then, there's gonna be some costs that has occurred with doing a fair housing market plan, running a lottery, all this kind of stuff, so adding on top money for peer review So the suggestion would be to put some sort of threshold on it.
So you get, someone's gotta do 2 or 3 or 4 units above their shop. It seems excessive to send them out to peer review.
I agree.
So,
I think
Yeah.
everything else
Yeah,
on that
that's
is,
true, limit, yeah.
is fine. So this is the last, one thing I wanted to just circle back with everybody. These are the thresholds for review. I just want to get people's thoughts. So one of the thresholds for minor site plan review would be if you're creating one new interior ADU. And then full site plan review for 2 to 3 interior, and I guess. This is already on the books now. We haven't really talked about it, but. I'm just wondering. Interior spaces. Do we feel like that's something that needs to be reviewed? I could see exterior detached units, but if you're finishing off the interior space and you're not changing anything to the exterior, which would be covered under these other sections, so basically anything in this column is going to trigger it. So if you're doing exterior changes incidental to the ADU, you're going to come in to talk about the exterior. But if you're just literally finishing off and upstairs, you're not doing anything. I'm not sure what we would talk about at planning board. It's truly,
I think that's a
Nothing
building
exterior.
code. That's up to the building code and building inspector, what's going on inside.
right, well, yeah, everything would have to meet
Right.
building
So I don't-
safety
I
and
don't
health
think it-
codes.
Needs to be underlined.
He's saying whether that would trigger the planning review.
So go back to your.
So right now. You would go for review if you're doing less than or equal to 500 square feet of exteriors.
Yeah.
Changing the building or adding site work.
It's fine, it's like,
If you're adding your site coverage. If you're creating additional parking. You go to planning board to review, or minor or planning board, depending on how many. But even if just on your own, the only thing you're doing on the site is adding one new interior accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
You would have to go to admin review or internal review or planning board, and I'm just not sure if that's truly the only thing you're doing.
Interior, no.
No,
So
what would that get anyone to do that? Why?
that's what I'm saying. I don't think we need to require
Yeah,
for interior. We could just change this to detached exterior units where you're gonna have some
Yeah.
physical change that's gonna be visible.
Well, we could prohibit ugly paint or shag rugs.
right.
I know,
Green
it's a
appliances.
thought.
Green,
they're coming back.
yeah,
Regulate use and taste.
avocados
Oh,
coming
wait.
back.
No beanbag
It
chairs.
actually is.
Oh,
And some of the
God.
side magazines. Please, no.
So that-
I agree, Paul, I
This-
think that.
I
owners-
would take that out. Yeah,
We change it to exterior
Yes.
ADUs.
yeah, exterior, that would be fine.
Exterior was freestanding,
Detached and or
detached.
exterior.
Well, if it's in
Freestanding.
addition to the, it'll trigger the above.
Right.
If it's more than 500 feet, it's gonna trigger the above, right?
Yeah, actually, that's a
This
good
is
point.
under-
So that's a
this-
question. Do we need to even?
I was just saying.
Qualify
This
that.
is saying less than 500. So they're saying that it's 500 square feet,
Yeah.
you need to have a major site plan review, but let's say I want to build something that's 450. I would at least need to have a minor,
Right.
so you don't want, 450. That's a good size ADU. So I think you do need something to cover the small ADUs.
Yeah.
So detached or exterior, wouldn't that cover
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that first column.
I think.
Yeah, the first column is under 500 feet.
Right, so.
I think it
Minus.
Well, if you are. Exterior construction. If you're building an exterior or detached,
Whether it's detached or
Or
But you're,
attached.
but you're going for review because of that, not be, so we know, you don't need the ADU.
Right.
We don't have to specify the ADU.
I don't
I
think
guess I'm
so.
getting into the definition of what's interior. I know what's attached is an interior, but let's say it, you bump out 6 new windows for that ADU. Is that an interior change or an exterior change?
Next to you.
I would think
That
that
would,
says
well, you're
alteration,
just,
expansion or alteration.
you're just, you're not changing the footprint, you're just
It's not changing the
changing,
footprint.
no, that would not trigger the review.
Alteration of
be-
the structure? Is it 6 new windows where there weren't? Wouldn't that be an alteration to the structure?
No, alteration of a structure less than or equal to 500 square feet, that's so
Okay,
where you're changing square footage.
So if I wanted to move a door,
You know, if you're just putting in, if you're building, well, I guess, it doesn't matter really if you're an ADU or just
Yeah.
anything. If you're just putting in windows and doors and you're not changing, adding square footage,
Right.
that would not
trigger anything,
trigger anything.
I think.
But you would still have to be adhering to the standards,
right? And you'd have to adhere to the building code.
right?
Right.
So like all that, the window talk we just went through, well, we were not regulating, but you wouldn't be able to put in the prohibited windows or anything, but you wouldn't be going to planning board for that.
can I ask a big picture question? A couple of years ago, when we were doing the development limits, one of the things we explicitly excluded, which used to be included in the review, were basements. And because we wanted, because you know, even on a 1,000-1,500 square foot house, you could be picking up another 1,000 square feet of whatever, and that was gonna be the you know, the give and take between we're constraining above, but giving more flexibility. So let's say someone's got 1,000 square feet in their basement. And it's all interior and they're not changing windows. Beyond a building permit, they don't need any review? Under this, I'm just trying to understand basements, because they're gonna be like 1,000, some of them could be 1,500 square feet.
Basement's 3,000 square feet.
Oh.
No, maybe not 3,000, what about 100?
I'm trying to think of how that impacts public good in general.
No, I'm just trying to figure out when we're making a distinction between interior and exterior. How much interior are we just saying, I mean, do we just not care? I don't have an opinion. I'm just kind of asking, because the basements could be, well, I suppose they'd be regulated by the septic. If they wanted, and the building code, if they wanted to put a
Bedroom.
bedroom down there. Is it,
I think they still have to adhere by, oh, it's bylaw, they just don't have to then be in front of planning. board.
Yeah, we're just talking about the regulatory review.
the regulatory review? I'm just asking the hypothetical. I hadn't thought about interior and exterior before. And if we don't care, or we don't think there's an issue.
Yeah, and sometimes the building's first put up or initial alteration, whatever it is, the basement is unfinished.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't ask any questions. It
And-
gets approved and there you go. 3 years later, they decide to do something with the basement. They still have to deal with building codes and that kind of thing and, you know, septic issues
So
and
it's
stuff
just
like
a-
that, but
it's a
that doesn't go
building
through
permit.
planning.
They're not
board.
back.
Okay, that's fine.
And the same thing in the essence of saying that.
What do we want to have reviews for is things that are impacting the public. So if
Yeah.
someone drives around your building. And they don't know that you add an ADU to it, then they don't have to go through a review. But if that review, if they had 4 new windows overlooking your backyard, you're like, oh, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I used to only have 1 window overlooking my backyard, now I have a bank of windows. Is that a fair thing for us to review?
But that's not an ADU question.
No, it might
just
not be,
regulatory.
It's just a regulatory question.
yeah, I'm just
Because it
putting
could
it,
be
I
a-
was putting in terms of this,
It could be a family room with enormous amount of windows.
Telescope.
right, and if they had them when it was built, that's fine, but if they're adding these.
If
in
they're
this-
adding these and they're overlooking your,
Yeah, because we're talking about building dense neighborhoods, so these issues
Yeah.
aren't an issue. Oh,
So I just wanted to bring up the definition that we have currently for gross floor area in the ECSD is the sum of all the area. Bring it up, so you can see.
Are you saying we didn't do the exclusion
We didn't do the exclusion for the basement.
for the basement?
Yeah, above,
Well, that, because
below.
that was just for residential.
That was just for residential.
A residential house that's in the ECSD, that's
Yeah.
mixed in there,
Would
would
get.
reverts
get-
back to the residential code,
Okay.
so it would, but. So that's the definition, and then in that table. So here's another question. Should this table actually say? Gross floor area, 500, should these numbers be GFA instead of square footage?
What's the definition for square footage?
Well, then footprint.
When we were doing the residential, we moved everything to those. Floor area, right?
No. This goes for floor area in this definition includes the basement.
But I think we use the terminology gross floor area, maybe exclusive of the basement.
Goes, we said gross floor area does not include this.
Well, we use site coverage.
Oh, we use
in
site coverage.
residential. The site coverage is the sum of the gross horizontal area of the floors of a dwelling. Excluding attics and basement areas. Just so you know, this is a fixed list for the future, because. These terms are not,
They're not in sync.
because site coverage in certain areas, gross floor area. This does cause confusion when people are trying to figure out if I have a knee wall where my head's hitting the slant, do I count that little area because it's not actually habitable and I can't stand up straight in it. So all these little things, and it factors in when people are trying to get their site coverage and they're fighting for square inches to get. So that's just a cleanup.
And also now the definition for residential uses would be different. So I thought what you just showed us was that for the ECSD. Basements will count towards gross square footage
And I think where that,
residential.
trying to think of where that would come into play. Make a difference, and I think. What particularly might make a difference is with formula businesses.
Well, when we say, for example, maximums of 7,000 square feet, is that gross floor area?
It's footprint. Right, and footprint is just how much it takes up
Okay,
on the land, not down, not up.
and so we've defined the footprint and we define the height.
Mhm.
And we define the setbacks, but basically, we've not put any gross area. I mean, they could theoretically with the 7,000 square footprint, utilizing basements and utilizing the 30 feet they'd have without bonus,
28,000 square feet.
20,000 square feet.
So other than in the regulatory section, do we use gross square footage anywhere else in the E ECSD?
No.
What's your solution, Paul, to this?
We say gross floor area.
Well, my thought was for consistency, if we reference what the thresholds for review would be gross floor area.
Okay,
And this would just be, so when you're doing something exterior, you're changing the building footprint. It's based on gross floor area. To be consistent with this. Because we don't define what square footage is, so. If this question comes up, we can say this is GFA and this is what we mean. It means,
Well, we use the term square footage, so we need to have the definitions for it.
he's saying
Okay.
don't use it, he's saying change that term,
To gross floor
gross
area.
floor area, to be consistent
But
with
it
the
should be
definition.
expressed in square feet. The gross floor area.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, can't change it back.
Right.
Or the type.
The difference between, okay, that table, max building
Square meters.
footprint is square footage, not gross.
right, so
Right.
that's just saying the footprint is 7,000 max. Within that footprint, you could have. Quite a lot of gross floor area, basement, multiple floors,
Or
And-
stories.
4 stories.
And
But-
basement.
But what we're saying is we're fine with that because we're controlling the outer dimension, which is what you're gonna see from the street.
For
So
the essence
that's
of
fine.
form-based codes.
Right,
So back to then to the regulatory review. Gross, well, you're usually gross floor area.
Read up 22.
so now we're talking about what would require review at different levels. So
Yeah,
exterior construction or expansion. Increasing. To a certain size of the footprint. Or the exterior of the building or the site area.
And your thought is if SF gets changed to gross floor area, that would be consistent with the definition. And what would then be the downside of that? If any?
Well, I don't know, I mean, I guess I'm asking for
what's the definition of gross floor area again? Sorry,
what?
GFA,
It's.
you read it a moment.
Some of all the-
All the internal space,
So
stairways.
it's
basement.
exterior perimeter as well, so it's the perimeter
the-
times floor.
all floor areas of the perimeter. Above and below ground. Including. Yeah, any mezzanines, attics, hallways, stairs, elevator, all, the whole total.
What if I have big two-story spaces without floor space? So if my second floor is just a mezzanine. My front of shop is 20-foot ceiling, back of shop is 210s. So if it's 100 square feet, is that 100 plus 50 or 100 and 100?
But we're not using gross.
That's what's on the table.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to find out. What GFA, does GFA count that, or is it say,
I think it counts everything, what you just read.
Right,
Yeah.
everything except for crawl spaces for mechanicals.
right, but
Way of all floors, so what you're
but-
talking about with the.
But this doesn't mean a prohibition, it just means what's
Oh, no,
triggered
but-
review.
But, yeah, but it's, if I have a space that's 2 stories tall. And the front half has a 2-story ceiling and the back half has 2 floors. Is that 200 square feet or 150 square feet?
I would think it's not, it's air, it's not usable space.
But
So
on
with the-
form-based codes, which is what we're doing, we're talking about, the only thing we really care about, which we've said several times, is the exterior when we drive around and look around. And if that building, if one guy says my building's 150 square feet, and the other guy says that mine's 200. Nobody can tell when they drive around. You have to go inside and look up and say, oh, you've got this big atrium. And that happens to all of us in our houses. It's like, because we see the same thing in planning. They'll come and they'll say, oh, it's only this many square feet. And I'll have to say, well, you've got this 2-story atrium and
And that
Yeah,
counts in
counts it.
residential. The
Right.
Well, yeah,
2-story.
that's an issue with what we did, because someone who just has a open loft space, you got 2 cape houses next to each other. One guy's got a finished first floor, the other guy's just got open air. One person's gonna get trapped in the site correction, the other one not,
for the rest of the town, that's what we've done.
right?
But for this area, we're saying we're all about form-based coding.
So you're saying, so that would be an argument for leaving it at square footage, not getting into GFA.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Unfortunately, I thought we were getting to a solution, but I'm undermining it now, yeah.
I guess. First of all, I think it would be highly unlikely. That, I know it's a home style, but you're gonna get a commercial property where they're gonna have a
Yeah.
3-foot atrium.
You do that all the time in a restaurant. The restaurant will have a 2-story, and then when you look at the kitchen's 1 story, and then there's a private dining room or offices above it.
So under gross floor area in the ECSD, it says. In all cases not designed for human occupancy shall not count towards gross floor area.
Right.
So if you had an atrium, that's not designed for human occupancy, except for spiders.
None,
They're not
none.
humans. Yeah, not people.
Yeah, so that takes it out.
So
These
we have
people have very good lawyers.
And first of all, that line is referring to if it's a mechanical room or a store, something that is not conditioned.
Right, but you
That
could
which-
argue, there's no human occupancy in open space.
There's
In
plenty of,
second story.
there is.
On a second,
There is, it's heated, it's occupied, it's occupied space. Are we occupying this room? We're occupying the room.
I think the way that's written, it's meant to refer directly back to the crawl spaces,
And,
the mechanical, not,
in plumbing
Okay.
chases and fireplace shafts and stuff like that, you can X out all that space.
Well, is the issue just the definition needs to say excluding atriums, or is there any other reason?
I think we're talking about several different things at the same.
yeah, I mean, I guess,
Let's.
I know I just threw this on the fire, but when I was looking at this chart, it reminded me like we have this whole definition for gross floor area, and I don't know that it's ever come up in all the years,
We don't use
but
it.
yeah. But we have it, so I just want to make sure that there's consistency in what we're referring back to. So if someone says, how do I measure the gross floor area or the building footprint or the square footage? I just want to make sure we have this cohesive.
I can see that coming up as an issue or board meeting. But it's atrium space, so I'm not counting that. That's why I want this additional spot over here and still fit within.
And you're like, well, do you have heat in that atrium space?
No, I'm just
Can you-
not
I
taking
can
a position, but I mean,
talk
it's
Right.
not usable in the sense that, if you've got the atrium, okay, up here, the usable space, there's a fencing or railing or whatever that.
But it is
Yeah,
usable
but
space. It gives that person's ego a big feel push when they shut the door every day. I'm saying it, no, it has value to it, right?
Yeah, no, there's arguments both ways, but if you're talking about, I'm thinking in terms of commercial area, usable floor space, which is a different thing, I know, but it's just open air. You walk into an REI, the first floor is covered with whatever, then you always go up a set of stairs.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it seems like the whole center area is just open atrium
Right.
kind of thing, and all the floor space for selling stuff is on the perimeter.
Right.
And lots of stores are designed that way, and I'm just curious as to how it's treated when someone goes in there. We only have so many X square feet that's usable space. That the air it's breathable, it's heatable, it costs money.
And I would
but
make the argument against them that it is usable space as part of your marketing plan to let people walk in the front door and see that second floor. And that it does have value. That's why they designed it that way.
But my point is, we have a definition for it. Okay, then we have to decide what the definition, whether it does or doesn't include atriums. But in the bylaw, there's nothing that we regulate or use it for.
Right, everything is footprint.
Everything is footprint, square foot.
So that's the
There's
argument.
nothing
not
that's
to
for
have-
square
leave it.
footage.
Okay, so
Nothing is tied to it. As a requirement of prohibition or permitted, you must do this, you must do that. Is there anywhere where in the content search for gross square footage
Or gross floor area.
or gross foot is spelling?
So if you're increasing your gross floor area of your restaurant, you're adding more spaces, this is saying
Right.
you need to account for that
Right.
parking.
Which to me is in your example, right, if I've got a restaurant in the diagram. If you've got a restaurant, this is the ground floor. And that's the second floor. That's your atrium space. If I've decided I want more tables,
And I want
so I'm
to
gonna
expand it
finish
now.
off. Second floor,
Yeah, no, I think,
now I have more floor space,
and then you should have to go and,
so I need more parking. More bedrooms.
right, then you have to go through the process.
So that would
Trigger the,
suggest you.
With
need
that, I haven't
something
changed
for
my building
gross floor.
footprint.
You need gross floor area as a standard in that example.
On
And
the
the
commercial side.
minimums, the unit
Mhm.
size
Yeah.
limits are based on gross floor area.
Mhm.
Which would mean yeah, so if you're designing an apartment building. You gotta be under these things. You're counting your mezzanines, your mechanical rooms, your closets, everything.
Yes,
Which I think we want that, because
yes. Yeah.
so when someone comes in and says, I'm adding 500 square feet onto my building. Do we want them to be calculating the gross floor area per this definition, or just saying it's
What page is that, Paul?
128 in the definition section?
Thanks.
That's what we don't specify, we just say square footage.
Well. I'm wondering if you need footprint and gross floor area. So if you're adding footprint, I'm adding. Any footprint, if I'm adding gross floor area. Right, I've gone from an atrium to full story. So is it both? Is it if you're gonna add. Interior new floor area. Even though you haven't changed your exterior.
Well, that's just, you're adding 500 square feet,
Right,
just footprint.
right,
That's-
so right now, that's what it's saying, right, it's just.
But if you're putting two floors on there,
then
now I
you're
got 1,000 square feet of gross floor area.
Do
I mean, I
we,
guess you're coming in for review anyways.
Right.
Because of the 500 square feet.
Do we need to add to the definition, trying to define atrium, other view? Not that I expect a lot of people to be applying for it anyway, but
No, I don't know if that's,
I don't want to muck it up. I'm just curious, because the example we're seeing here, they have to come in for that, but if we're not defining this airspace as, I don't know. I don't want someone building something, sneaking in there.
well, what are we trying to prevent? We've said. Time and again, we're not regulating what happens inside the building. Other than building code and septic and all that, so that's a different department. So we're not regulating what's inside. The only example I can think of where the inside matters is relative to parking. Where in what
Jackie said,
Jackie, in your example with the restaurant that suddenly could 25% increase in use space, which would impact the parking. But
all right.
is
Well,
there
so-
anything else that we care about? The internal. We have limits on size of units, minimums and limits. But those are square footage, not gross. No, but it's gross
But
forward.
so, yeah, so perhaps it's fine the way it is, because in Jackie's example, you're coming in for review because of the first 500 square feet. So yes, you may be adding second floor with additional gross floor area, but you're still at planning board review for the
Right.
exterior footprint, which is what we're concentrating on. Anything else in the gross floor area is related to the unit sizes and the parking, which I guess then you would refer to the gross, what do you mean by gross floor area? I want to add 10 new seats. Okay, but you got to factor in, it's not just the open floor area, are you adding more mechanical space? Are you adding storage closet? All that's going to count towards you. So that's where we want clarification.
Right.
So I guess that's why you would want it, and that's where it would come into play.
In the regulatory.
So, all right.
Yeah.
I guess it works the way it is, but I want to
It's
bat this around
good to
because
consider. But that's been.
the question comes up, when do I look at this definite, what am I looking at this definite? Is it for this or that?
So we're
So-
coming down the fact that it's gross floor area. It is an important tool for regulating sort of parking and unit size, et cetera. We have that in there. It's not as critical in terms of triggering the review criteria. Because at the square footage, you're gonna trigger the review criteria based on footprint. But then gross floor area will kick in depending upon the other things they decide to do. Correct? So that's why it's not,
Yeah, and I think anything that's. If you're creating a volume of space in the interior, we're not regulating that other than the controls we have for the unit sizes and. Things like. The windows and things, you still have to adhere all the architectural standards and the signage and all that stuff we talked about, the illuminating. Interior illumination, all that stuff would come into play if someone say, well, 500 square feet, but I'm adding 1,000 and I got these windows, because I'm gonna have this atrium. We're not controlling that other than if you're going into something in the architectural standard that's gonna create a problem. Then we talk about, okay, maybe you're not gonna be able to have this giant, huge. Big window where you're trying to achieve because of what's other things. So there's still like be that opportunity to shape the project that way. So I think we can, I know that was a long way around, but I did want to make
Well,
sure.
we're all smarter now, so that's.
Yeah,
I'm looking at time.
all right, I think that was the last one. That was the last thing on the changes to this. That was it.
So just the procedural matter, since there's been a couple tweaks of this since we sort of first launched this in January. Paul, is this version with these tweaks, what's showing up on the website?
No, I was waiting till today,
Today.
so after today, I'll post
You'll post the change.
another link so people can see
Okay.
the changes.
And then I think when we go to the planning board, we should, you know. Well, if it's on the link, it'll be fine. Mhm.
And so do we need a motion that, or just?
Oh.
Consensus
Hold on,
that we
three-
approve the
Before we do
document?
that, I had one more question on 3.8.8.1. I thought that was something like.
Say that again.
3.8.8.1. We're changing it from encouraged to required.
What section?
3.8.8.1.
Say it slow.
That's been in there for a while.
You want to impress me,
Oh, it
be an
does?
auctioneer and then go into planning and.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. then.
Yeah,
It says that you have to talk to Paul.
yeah,
Look at it,
yeah,
they're
we did that a few times
Yes.
ago.
Are happy with it.
Okay.
But they've already started our meetings, said, oh, this is so
Yeah,
good.
it
to
is.
hash this
Oh,
out."
really? Oh, good.
Yeah, this is already starting to work. People are using this. And Paul is being able to hammer people a lot more in terms of shaping projects. So by the time they get to the planning board, a lot of hopefully issues will have been sorted through.
And Martin, what was your question? Now that we're all here.
Oh, I didn't realize it would change to required versus. The last time I read it closely. So.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all right. So we get the next one.
so we have
ADU.
consensus. Should we
Oh,
formally say we have consensus?
We have
Yeah,
consensus.
That for the ECSD bylaw with form-based code amendments as discussed.
As discussed, or, you know, yeah, do you even want to say recommended by town council or?
I said that in the first.
Oh, in the beginning,
sentence.
yeah, okay, that's fine, okay.
So the ADU
ADU.
bylaw. This changes from last time.
Wait a minute, that one you just skipped over. Yellow book.
Yeah,
That one.
this relates to something further down. So for now, we're keeping the language that requires that the unit has to be short-term rental prohibited, but also either owner occupied or year-round rental. We're trying to keep that language in. And I put language in to refer to the seasonal communities, because that's where seasonal communities have a little more capacity to do that stuff, so this is being sent to the AG for a pre-review, so hopefully we'll hear back. If that's kind of a red flag for them, but I think it's important to try to preserve that, and this is just kind of like nuance about. The way it's worded versus the intent, so I'm hoping that. Keep that.
The seasonal communities has not resolved this issue in terms of where the regulations will come down, so. I mean, when I said,
If seasonal communities, you're allowed to. Have year-round, put in place year-round. Restrictions, so. But the seasonal communities is. On like a parallel track with the home, the affordable homes. Legislation, so. We're not clear if the AG is gonna see that as like you can kind of blend these things to achieve what you're trying to do, or if they look at it, so. Keeping the language, which is what we have now, we're not changing that. Just hoping that they don't strike it out. So we'll know that for a town meeting. Worst case scenario, we have to we'll keep the prohibition on short-term rentals, we'll have to change the language to, so it reads that we're not, so. I think the major thing to discuss is, do we want to allow multiple ADUs on a site or not? So the first ADU is going to be allowed by right, so everybody's entitled by right, as long as you still got to do the site coverage limits, your septic capacity, your setbacks and everything. But if you have all of that covered, you're not creating any issues, you're entitled to do one ADU. So you have a single family home, you can do your one ADU.
Oh, I thought the site coverage limits, I thought that. My reading of it was that the dimensional stuff as far as being setbacks and heights would apply. But that specifically that the density limits site coverage limits would not apply to ADU.
You still have to adhere to the site coverage.
it wasn't an extra,
It wasn't what?
it wasn't extra. Beyond the zoning, it was if your site could accommodate it. I think that's how it's always been, correct?
We have ADU. The ADU doesn't require minimum upland, but is subject to the site coverage standards.
Oh, it's that.
But is that what it always said? It looks like it's a change.
Yeah, we put that in there to clarify that it was still subject to the site coverage. So if you, so. And if you have a tiny lot and you can. Adhere to all of the.
I don't
Limits.
disagree, I just, yeah, okay. So. I think. As long as you can adhere to the site coverage standards. Pass the building code and the septic. I don't see a need to require only one.
What's the trigger that something becomes a cottage colony? Well. in terms of- Is there,
I'm visualizing the opposite, if we have a large lot. How many, and you can fit in any number of ADUs, if you're not limiting that, you've got yourself a whole rental.
well, that's what I'm
thing
saying,
going, you know.
that's what becomes a cottage colony, or what becomes like
Yeah.
a subdivision.
Because I've always been focused on what it does to the neighborhood. I just running through my head all the time, and. If you've got, and we've had a recent case like this that had houses and lots that are all similar, very similar size. One large lot. What if they put in a whole ton of ADUs because they haven't violated the lot coverage?
The
But
cottage,
what's
So-
that do to, I don't know.
So I asked town council how this, so like I said, right now the bylaw is one ADU permitted by right for each principal dwelling unit. Then the issue is, what about a duplex, a triplex, a cottage colony?
I like that cottage community. 35.
So. I guess Carolyn's suggestion was. To address that, you could change it to one ADU is permitted by right on a lot, just on the lot.
With the,
with the principal dwelling unit. But she's going on to say that if you look at the ADU, I mean, the ADU regulations, what the state is envisioning that you can have multiple ADUs on a lot. If you have multiple,
Primary dwelling.
because they're tying it to the dwelling. So if you have multiple principal dwellings, duplexes, two principal dwellings, you would have multiple ADUs, provided you adhere to all of the dimensionals and septic and everything. So that's what the intention of the state is. So what our option is that we have to allow at least one by right for each principal. So one on the lot. If we change it to one on the lot, if you have a duplex, one of the units is entitled to it. If you want multiple, then you can require a special permit.
Here's the concern I have. If we have a duplex and you've got the space and that you end up with two ADUs, that like doesn't bother me. But what if you have, Martin, you often talk about buildings you see. What if you have this very large farmhouse or some old house? And suddenly someone says, you know, I can make 5 or 6 condos here. Now you got 5 or 6 principal dwellings. Does that mean each of those principal dwellings could have 5 or 6? Yeah,
one per.
one per. So I mean, I'm just-
Now you got 10 total.
Then you
The same
got-
thing I was thinking of, because that's the case of where the church used to be on Massasoit. Those 4 or 6 units are there on a nice sized lot. And if there was room for one ADU, that's basically the first guy who gets to town, gets to build an ADU on the front lawn and nobody else does.
But I'm like super comfortable with the notion of if there's a duplex on property and you can fit, you know, and you've got the sites and you did this and that. But I get a little nervous going beyond a second ADU because then now you're getting into a cottage colony or commercial development, which is kind of opposite.
Or a
the
mini house or, you know, a small house.
small, you know,
So yeah, if we tie it to the lot. If the cottage colony is on a single lot. Only one ADU is allowed by right for the whole lot, so whoever. It's at first, I guess.
But then
If
they have
anybody
lots
else
of-
wants to, you'd have to be. We could allow it. Well, there's 2 options. We could allow just nothing, just this one ADU by right and that's it. Or we have the option if we want to have the carve out to allow the possibility of having ADUs, we can do that, but we have to. Add in a section that says. That's a special permit.
I like the idea of. If you have a duplex. And you can meet all the lot requirements and septic and everything. You could have 2 ADUs, because you have 2 principal dwelling units.
That would be the case of a duplex that has a single owner. As opposed to a condo. That has 2 separate owners. There's a big difference. Right?
well, I don't think we can regulate ownership. That's the
yeah,
No, we're not
problem.
regulating ownership, but I'm saying there's 2 different types of duplexes. There's a
Right.
duplex where it's a condo. And there's a duplex where there's a single landlord.
I don't care.
Um,
I don't care about the ownership. I'm focused on what it's doing to the neighborhood and.
You cap it at 2, or do you?
Well, that's, I mean,
And I
my
would cap it at 2.
inclination is cap it at 2 because you have, we made zoning changes a few years ago. To allow duplexes on 40,000 square foot lots.
Right.
We want to encourage that
We do.
as a rental option. And so now you'd be giving them 2 additional. Potentially, if they had a big enough lot,
If there's big enough lot and they can solve the septic and all that,
but the
But if you
notion
got
of having,
but more than
But
2 becomes,
3 family or a 4 family.
well,
Do you
more than
have
2
a third or
becomes a,
4th?
you know, more like a cottage colony.
well, we don't really have 4 families, but you could. You know, you could have a property.
Do we have a
sub-
prohibition against them?
Can
Is it-
someone take a big
Not
farmhouse
prohibited,
and
some
make
do.
4 condos right now?
In residential, no.
No.
That's a topic for future discussion. If we want to allow.
Which is, I think we're in favor of allowing that to happen. You know, to someone to break up a large property into multiple small ones, and we don't want to then
It's not.
If
it's
we're
the-
saying,
it's
if
the
we're saying you're
extra
turning this
stuff.
farmhouse into 4 condos, that's what we're agreeing to, and then they come back a year later and say, oh, now we want my 4 ADUs as well.
Yeah, but we're not saying. Each condo gets an ADU.
Well, that's where,
That's the
that,
question.
that's
That's
the
the
problem, because you can't regulate ownership. So if you
Right.
make 4 owners, you got 4 principal owners. It's no, even we think it's one structure, but we got 4 principal owners.
Yeah.
So,
I'm saying it's a downside of, we're in favor of carving up the big farmhouse.
Right.
But right now, the farmhouse could have 1 ADU and we're like, oh, that looks fine. But now this would allow 4 ADUs.
So I think by right. Up to 2, if you have a duplex, you can have 2. But other than that, you'd have to come for major review. There might be a situation.
I don't even know if you want, do you want to throw this open to the planning board? So this is gonna be your Bow Road all over again. This is a nightmare that's going on right now with a big, large lot in a small residential neighborhood. I mean,
So right now, we're tying the ADU to the dwelling.
Right.
So this is what is opening the door to, I have a duplex.
Right.
If we change it so that it's the ADU is tied to the lot. Then we're getting back to, I got a duplex. There's only 1 ADU is allowed by right.
Right.
If we want the other, so one of the units, and that's basically, we're not controlling it, whoever gets there first, we wouldn't have control over that. But if we want the other unit to be able to have a deed, we could do that, but that would be by special permit.
Yeah.
The same thing, and that would be the same thing for a cottage colony, if it's a cottage, if it's 20 cottages all in one big lot. Whoever gets there first can have that ADU. Anyone else who wants an ADU would be by special permit. And that would be the same thing for a condo. I mean, we got condos. I mean, there's an element of the condo ownership gonna regulate that themselves and not prohibit that, but.
Right.
But if we wanted, but our bylaw would treat that as something, it's 1 lot.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's a feeling of unfairness about,
Well, I'm sorry,
that strikes me as unfair, right? But the person has the, you need 4 condos and the person that gets there first gets to build an ADU.
again, yeah, I mean, that's for discussion. All I'm saying is we're obligated to allow 1 ADU. Either to a dwelling or a lot, we have to do that, but where we go from that, and we don't have to go beyond that, but.
I would,
we
I
have
would,
to figure out what.
I would allow 2, but I would cap it at 2
Without a special permit.
without a special.
On a lot, it's a lot.
but would you wanna have the ability that someone can come in with a fancy lawyer to say, well, it's not absolutely prohibited, and get the 4 ADUs? I mean,
Which is a limited term.
yeah, you get your second with a special permit, or you get more with more.
You get your
Is it
third.
cap,
would-
is it absolute?
I would say an absolute cap
Yeah.
at 2. Skip the special permit process. You get 2, you're done.
I mean, there's 2 ways. I would be comfortable with the cap. The other thing I would be comfortable with is leaving it as is, because I think there's larger questions here that is starting to trigger that Paul has mentioned will come up next year. So I mean, do we need to do this now? Because I think there's questions about the condos and the conversions and, some of this stuff that we may want to go back and tweak. I'm just throwing that out.
Well, I guess the way it is now. Is.
Well, the planning board, sometime in the last year, there was a case where we had. People who wanted to have 2 units. For worker housing.
Right.
Yeah, those are ADUs, as I recall. They had two units, so duplex were on the lot,
Yeah.
and they with 2 more, so we've already
So they-
sort of done that, right?
Yeah, so they demonstrated that there were 2 principal dwelling, they were detached, but
Right.
they were 2
Principal.
dwelling units that had a kitchen and everything, and
Yeah.
so we interpreted that as.
Each
One
dwelling
per
unit had.
unit.
Right,
had-
which is our bylaw now says. You can have an ADU. Per dwelling unit.
So going
But-
back to the duplex, with our current bylaw,
So right now it says one ADU is permitted by right for each principal dwelling unit. So,
So we're open right now to a condo complex and multiple ADUs.
Yes.
I don't want this. We gotta change things. You know, at least until we get into a greater discussion next year.
so that's why if we change it to a lot,
Then we have to say two.
well,
No,
so if we
yeah,
change it to a
so-
lot, then, and you say no more than two, then, yeah, so.
Yes.
Yeah, I changed a lot, no more than two, happy with that, or limited one per lot. For the moment. but I mean,
Is the size limit, the 900 square foot size limit will still apply to each one?
Nine
And
hundred or 50% of the principal dwelling unit. To what you could see accessory.
So when we get to 50%, does each one get the 50%? So that's the point. I have 1,000, I have a 1,200 square, let's say I got 1,800 square foot house. So I can build a 900, which is subservient to the house.
The
Now I
rate,
get to build two 900s, so now my ADU space is the equivalent to the house. I'm getting at, if we want to allow two ADUs, we should still limit it to 50% of the floor space of the house.
the state guidance says where there are multiple principal dwellings, gross value of the largest dwelling is used to determine the maximum size.
so if you had two duplexes or a duplex, the largest,
So I can have a duplex, one's 1,800 square feet, the other's 300 square feet. Now I can build two ADUs, at both at 900.
Mhm.
So that 300 square foot little nook you've got in the basement that we're gonna count as a residential space. Now gives you 900 square feet of buildable space.
and but you still have to comply with the maximum lot size
I know, yeah.
and septic
But
and.
I'm saying but we're working our way around the whole idea of what the state law was very definitive about, saying that the ADU should be subservient to the main house, not be smaller. And when you're building two, when we have to, you carry that forward, because this says the opposite, that the larger of the two units will be set.
Well, that's
to
also
the
the
unit.
state law.
But it's half the size of the floor of the main house, from 900 square feet, whichever is smaller.
What I'm getting at is that you're getting, because my house was a two-family in Northeast Hampton. I had a tiny little basement apartment that I got rid of decades ago. But that basement apartment would have given me the right to build. In my upstairs, I got one ADU, and that little basement apartment that was 400 square feet, I could build another 900. I'm just saying we're getting unintended consequences.
I'm not.
Well, you
It's not
had
intended.
an apartment, I would say that's not the principal dwelling. You had you already had an accessory apartment.
I had two-family, it was a two-family.
It was zoned as two family.
No, it wasn't zoned as a two-family, it was permitted as a two-family. Anyways.
So to get to, I mean. So your thing is to Carolyn and Kevin's point about. Capping at a two, you would then need to make what changes?
We would change. That to be this,
That section,
one ADU is permitted, two ADUs are permitted by right
no,
per lot.
if you wanna do it by lot, yes.
Yeah, so we would change. It would be two ADUs are permitted,
One per dwelling unit, two per lot.
yeah, I guess the change is to refer to a lot, not the dwelling unit, cap it at two. And then. So we do that and then. There's no capacity for any additionals. So we're actually being a little more lenient, we're saying you can have. The state says you gotta have one, we're saying you could have two by right, and then there's no, that's
I
it.
mean, I like that it's because in the sense that we have a housing shortage, so if we can get one more unit on the lot, great, that gives someone a place to live. But I don't want to create large series of buildings because you get a large lot.
Unintended cottage call.
I can,
Well, if I'm a developer or an owner and I have the right to have two, maybe 600 square foot. I'm gonna build I'm gonna build like you're not gonna wanna build two structures. Cause then you have to bring your utilities, I mean, you end
Right.
up with
You're
a
gonna find
mini duplex in
Least
the
cost
back.
way of
Yeah.
doing it,
1,800 square feet.
I mean, you've got a little,
I'm saying that if you're building a second one, we should cap the square footage, because The whole idea of
Yeah.
ADU is that it's clear when you drive down the street, oh, there's the house. Oh, and they have an ADU out back.
Yeah.
If we're gonna allow multiple ADUs and those ADUs can be attached to themselves, then the ADU is gonna be bigger, it's gonna be more.
Well, I'm not sure, I'm not following that, maybe I'm just not getting it, but if you're limited to 900 square foot per ADU. If they're attached, if they're separate, doesn't matter, if they're attached, you get one's for 900, one's for 900, if they're separate, one for.
I'm not, yeah, being
How does that-
attached or not wasn't the issue is that it's no
But
longer,
1800
it's no
square feet.
longer
So visually, you now might have a
you know, the very first
1,300
paragraph.
square foot house that has now an 1,800 square foot ADU duplex.
I'm sorry, say that again. I get this mental block on this for some reason. If the main house is how many square feet?
Well, really, that would be true.
Let's say, let's say it's 1,800,
For a single family house, not a duplex.
right,
Okay,
but you're gonna build
Well,
two,
the average in town is 1,500.
but if it's a single family house, it's one principal dwelling unit.
no,
you only
we
build
just,
one
we
ADU.
just threw that out. We're
So-
saying that you're allowed to do two now.
Or it's still tied per principal one per principal dwelling unit.
Yeah.
So if you get a single family
so you
house
have
that's
to have
1,800 square feet,
No,
and
is that
then
true?
one
Is that true?
ADU.
That's not
for
true.
900.
Weren't we saying that we do two ADUs regardless of how many?
I
We-
No, no, two ADUs per lot,
Per lot.
one ADU per
Per
principal dwelling unit.
Yeah, I thought it was a.
We're just adding, the part that's already there about one ADU per principal dwelling unit, that would remain.
He's
We'd
gonna,
be
no,
adding
he's gonna
on
take that.
maximum of two
doesn't
ADUs
have
per lot. So the most you can have is, you can have a single family house with one ADU.
Okay.
You can have a duplex,
with two.
one ADU each. And that's the limit.
But Paul was saying that rather than tie it to the principal dwelling unit.
Yeah.
He was suggesting just tie it to the lot.
Yeah, that's where I was bringing my point about saying, I agree with you, Kevin, that if it's a two-family house, each one is 1,500 square feet, you can build two 750s.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
My point was, if I have just one 1,800 square foot ranch house, now.
If
with
you're not.
what we
tying
just
it to
talked
the-
about verbally, they can build two 900 square foot ADUs.
Okay, I see you've been getting that.
And they
right.
can be attached if they wanted to, which is what Mary said. And now I'm saying that goes against the entire.
You gotta.
Okay, no, I
Feel of the
get-
law.
I get your argument. I'm just thinking, I was coming at it from the different approach. As I said, if you're limiting it to two ADUs per lot, regardless of anything else. It would still be limited to one ADU per principal dwelling.
To have two standards.
If that,
Right,
if
we
we
can't
keep
use
it
both.
both, yeah, if we do that, I'm
Yeah,
agree.
I
agree
didn't
with
think we
that.
were splitting it.
We need to have the it triggers both. One, and then you were adding the.
And the
cap
other
issue.
point is that, let's say you have a house and you have it's a dwelling unit, let's say it is a two-family house.
Hmm.
And one of them is really, really small, it's just 400 square feet.
Okay, then the ADU that would go to the 400 square foot
Would only be
lot would be
200.
limited to a 200 square.
That's what I
ADU.
wanted.
No,
Which-
no.
Which,
Yeah,
In the state law.
Yeah.
If there are multiple primary dwellings.
Yeah.
It defaults to the larger of the two, so if you have a 400 and a 1,600. Both ADUs can be 800,
That's the state law.
that's the state law,
okay,
We can't
that's-
change that.
Yeah, that's.
yeah, we
Oh,
don't have
that's what I-
control over
Okay,
that.
I get
well,
it.
the only control we
I
have
didn't
is,
realize it's a state. law.
yeah,
Again, I'm going back to my question about, we've capped it at one. I think there's a lot of issues here to think through. Do we wanna leave it?
Yeah, leave it for
But,
now.
I mean,
But
I mean, I'm just saying, we get a lot of these kind of issues
Yeah.
next year that have to be. As we think back to residential, and I'm just wondering whether we need to. Think that one through and just leave it at the one cap. It's not like we got
One by right,
one by right.
but a second by special permit. Potentially.
So, we don't have to do the special permit
Right.
now. We could do it in the future, so.
I'm just,
But, okay, I agree with Gary on that, but let's not get too crazy now, save address it next year anyway.
Yeah.
But the language, current language talks about one per dwelling unit.
Right, so right now, someone
So
could,
someone could have a 5-unit condo building, and that says it's okay to build a bunch of ADUs. So
580.
that we have to change something, so it's limited to one.
right,
per lot.
and that's why the case you brought up, that was the interpretation. He said, he demonstrated he had two. He actually had two detached single-family homes.
Mhm.
and we use the bylaw to say, it says you can have one per principal dwelling unit. So you have two.
And that didn't become controversial because he's on Route 6 and there wasn't a tight neighborhood that was gonna.
Right.
And he had the lot
sorry?
coverage to do it.
Which one?
Right, you still had the, I mean, I think that's
And-
coming back to the
and-
controlling
yeah,
factors.
that's the lot coverage.
Say that again?
It's heading.
They still have to meet the lot coverage
Same
requirement.
area. I
Right,
can't
so-
put the address on it.
It still doesn't have to be a fairly big lot to have that
Separate
many.
buildings now.
Be able to
Sorry.
do,
And he owned. I forget what type
Essentially
of
four
business it
buildings.
was, but he had a
Right.
real issue with
Right.
worker housing. And
But if
perhaps
you
lives
have
in
a
this
big
since
enough
long time,
lot,
employees
it's good
because of
to
housing.
do.
So he was able to do that.
we need every bit of housing we can have, and I would hate to. I would prefer, I should say. that's wrong.
I agree
would
with you.
hate to
I'm with
I
you.
would prefer not to limit it to one. A lot, I would prefer it limited to two.
I'm
And
just,
as
I'm
long
just
as they
thinking,
can do
I
this-
agree with you to create as much housing as we can, but I can think of all these dirt road neighborhoods that have. Small houses on larger lots, and having an ADU come in is going to be new. But having a real estate investor come in and say, oh, I'm gonna buy a few of these, and then I'm gonna put two ADUs, I'm gonna turn these single cottages into 3 units.
No,
Uh,
I'm saying one per primary dwelling. Maximum 2 per lot.
Yeah.
So if it's a
I-
duplex, they can each have an ADU.
But you get into the other issue that Martin's talking about,
About
as
the
far as
size
state
difference.
law, that if you
Right.
have unequal sizes,
I-
then the second one is
understand.
half the size of this. That's a whole nother area of debate, and if we're gonna be tackling this next year, I think that's probably a more appropriate time to go after that, trying to maximize housing, but without sacrificing the neighborhood in the process. I just think we need to tweak what we have now so that you don't have condo owner build kind of project throwing out 4 or 5 ADU units until we've had a chance to address this. And for the moment, we could limit it to the one with the understanding that next year we're going to tackle this in a broader sense and come up with something that,
I'm saying I would agree with that, except I would limit it to 2.
well, again, we
So-
still run into the issue about the unequal sizes,
Two-
and that you have an
Unequal
ADU
size
bigger than
and
the
principal
principal.
ownership. We're not getting at the condo issue.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, I'm just disagreeing.
What is it that we want to avoid?
More than 2, I mean,
More than
commercial real estate investment looking at, you know. I can make 5 condos and then I can make 5 ADUs, now I've got 10 units.
Do we
So-
want, but I guess what we don't want. We don't want. Multiple units to each be entitled by right to their own ADU. Is that what we're trying to avoid?
Right, if you have a triplex, for example,
So we don't want a triplex to automatically say I can get 3
Right.
ADUs, or we don't want a 20. Lot,
20 unit-
20 unit cottage colony say, oh, we can each have 20.
Right.
20,
That's
20 ADUs.
just. We're all clear about that, then. Craft the language to that extent, but.
I'm just going, I'm going back to the conditions and the requirements in 5.2, and it says an accessory dwelling unit shall be clearly subordinate in use, size, and design
right,
to the principal structure.
But doesn't that clash with the state? As far as you have to go to the larger units.
And that loophole that we talked about, and if we allow more than 2, that can happen. We only allow 1, that can't happen.
So. There's 2 things, there's Kevin's real concern about more than 2 condo issue, Carolyn is. Similar in agreement, but would like the max to be at 2. Do you have a feeling, Martin, in terms of where you're coming down on this?
I think that if we're gonna look at this again next year, we don't have that much experience with ADUs as a town and boards. I wouldn't mind going back to this again next year. I would like to limit 1 per unit, but it creates that.
Well, I mean, I obviously
With the max.
propose the deferral. But I'm also thinking of Kevin's concerns and I'm thinking of what we've already seen. People are already starting to interpret what they can,
I think if people read this as a maximum of 2 ADUs, like going to town meeting and they see that we're 2. That'll raise a lot of hairs on people's back.
Well,
because it potentially has.
2 per lot, as opposed to 2 per.
Well, I mean, I think if you could be. Well, not that we want to say this, well, actually. You could have 20 of these under the current language, you
Right.
know, if your lot, you know, if you had a 6-acre lot. You
Oh,
could
right.
virtually have a
Well, and
subdivision.
if you're a smart condo developer, you'll build one big condo and a bunch of little condos, and then you use the one big condo as your excuse to build
Oh, yeah,
Which,
maximum.
which that would be
ADUs.
figured out in a
see,
heartbeat.
Oh, of course,
another
that's what they
issue,
do.
we don't have a definition for what a principal dwelling unit is. And I could picture developers coming in and tweaking what a principal dwelling unit is, so.
I don't want
it's-
them to define it
That's that
for us,
perfect
what it's
That's-
gonna be,
Yeah,
as they're prone to do.
right,
we have a principal use of building.
yeah, it doesn't say principal dwelling unit.
Apparently, I'm sensitive to trying to get as many units as we can out of there, but. I think, whereas Martin says we're not that experienced with ADUs. If we put this on the agenda for next year, we can get a lot more information, and while it may delay. The building of an additional unit on a number of lots in the next year, assuming people come in with that request. I really think we should limit it to 1 for now.
What about special permit for more than 1?
Here's where this is again my bias. When it comes to special permits, they're great. Special permit is a great tool to help control things, but. When you get into the heat of battle and the attorneys on the other
Oh, yeah,
side,
yeah,
are
they've got
one
all the
thing, you're going
engineers, the
back and
architects,
forth
and
on
the
it,
attorneys,
and one exception suddenly becomes the law for the next 20 years. I like
No,
to
that's
limit the number of special permit things that there are to get away from the ambiguity that you oftentimes face in those meetings, because I don't think the towns do well on running that. It's great that we have the control over it, but when the debate starts raging, I start to lose confidence as what the end result is going to be from it. It's nice when you have a lot of active neighbors that come out
Right.
that can make a stand on it, but
Doesn't have.
in one sense, we're not really supposed to weigh that. And you get to a very sharp attorney browbeat the board into something.
What are you talking about?
I just
So
random
I
thoughts,
think
you know.
the reason we're doing this to begin with was to get in alignment with the state. Right, which is why we're adjusting the size and all that stuff, so. Doing the one per lot. Brings us into alignment, but controls. Potential proliferation of existing, which is probably maybe a half step back from where we are. We're also stepping back to, right now, we allow larger ADUs than 900 square feet, so we're stepping back from that. I anticipate that. The seasonal communities, and there's other things we have to address. Tiny houses and some other things, so I anticipate that there's more work to do on other things, and then so that it would make sense to come back in at the same time if we want to make further revisions to ADU while we're doing tiny houses, while we're doing. The minimum lot size, there's some language you gotta work on about minimum lot sizes,
Okay.
so. And I know I've said this many times. To me, it's not a bad thing that we keep going back to these, every year we got zoning stuff. That's not a bad thing.
No.
I think too many towns just don't touch their zoning for decades, like we're coming back, which means we're doing the work, we're tweaking
that's
it, we're
the-
trying to adjust, we're trying to make it usable, but also balance with what, the community, so I know it's a lot of work.
Okay, one.
Yeah, but I think it's valid because.
Let's
No,
get
All right,
Moving on.
Too much caffeine.
and with
So
the
the-
absolute, we're coming back. Well, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
myriad
Next
of,
year.
there's a myriad of residential issues we're going to have to
This is what
discuss.
town council said, we could adjust it to revise it, so 1 ADU permitted by right on a lot with a principal dwelling, to clarify that. It's 1 ADU on the same lot,
Yes.
that,
Alright.
and then we're
Just
not
leave it there.
doing,
Yes.
we're not doing any special permit, that's it for now, that's it.
Okay,
And it's for 1 year.
for 1 year.
We'll try to come back next year.
Kevin, okay?
I'm good with that, I'm good with that, no,
Okay,
Well, that's the most restrictive one.
it is, but
think-
understanding if we.
Everyone
next
here
year.
wants to loosen it, but we're not agreed on how. much
Yeah,
loose we
with the
want it
right
to get.
controls.
so I would say we'll change that. I guess the only other thing I would mention. We are testing out the language about, we can have language in there that says that the unit has to be
Year round.
year round, but also like actively rent,
Yeah,
or this. I don't know if actively is the right verb or not, but just something that says you can't build this thing and just let it sit or end up using it as a guest house. But there's not a great solution to that because it comes down to enforcement and tracking and monitoring, so.
Yeah, staff.
well, if you have it and then someone complains.
Right.
Then you can enforce it.
Yeah.
Doesn't say you have to go look.
And it becomes a shell game because technically under the law, if we wrap someone's fingers because they were really using it as a guest house for their summer guests. All that they have to do under the current law, under the current state code would be to unplug the stove.
Right.
I mean, we haven't gone as far as saying, no, you have to demolish the kitchen. So there's a bunch of issues here I think we have to look at long term.
Like if somebody wanted to build an art studio. Are we creating a loophole for people to create accessory buildings?
Potentially.
Yeah.
But then you also think. They're creating these units. They're there.
Yeah,
I mean,
potentially maybe the next person will rent it.
yeah. If we start trying to chase down people about decommissioning it and to convert, then we're making them go out of their way to not have a unit that's
Wonder
easily
if it's, I
rentable
know,
in
that's where you
future.
want, that's where
I
you
mean,
want
there's
to
no.
tie into tax policy instead, say, you know, you
Yeah.
get taxed at a certain rate. So rent it, but it's taxed at a rate.
So I think if we can have some language in there, it's there. It comes down to, like I said, enforcement and monitoring, and maybe we're not doing a great job on that, but if there is some egregious issue, we can use that, but otherwise, yeah, there might be ADUs that get built and they're basically being used as guest houses, or they're being used for when the kids and the grandkids come down, but
That's not what we want.
it's not what we want, but we don't,
Not the- But it does relate.
they can't be
to
renting it. That
the
gets the primary
short-term
thing is they
rental.
can't be
They
renting
can't get
it.
a short-term rental certificate.
And that's,
So
to
then they're not in compliance.
me, that's the primary thing to
Yeah.
prevent. If
Right.
these other things happen, they're gonna happen, and we might just have to grow into a different solution for that, or language in the
Right.
future, but
Okay,
so that's that.
And
So we're
for
not-
example, the full-time tax
don't-
exemption we're putting in. It would be nice to put an exemption on that if you rent a house full-time.
I agree.
Like just because I live in Connecticut, you know, you're gonna raise my taxes, but if I decide to rent it. To somebody who works and lives here in town. I sort of making that, working against our own best interest,
Mhm.
because that's just gonna get passed on to the renter. Not to bring it up.
Okay, so we have a consensus in terms of ADU, and this will have to go to the planning board as well as part of that public hearing. Was the public hearing notice include that as well?
Yeah, there'll be the hearing.
There was a little oversight when they presented, they published the public hearing. They didn't include the design guidelines, which we will present and discuss on March 19th. But it will require the planning board to have another quick public hearing, probably in, what were you thinking, April or?
Yeah, we
To
could
adopt
do it.
the-
We could
It
do
would
it.
be good to, because they're so interrelated, we don't want one hanging out without the other, so we're gonna have to go back for a quick. But we're gonna present the design guidelines on the 19th, so hopefully this is just an administrative catch up. All right, we've talked about the task force schedule. We have 10 minutes before we go. The next thing up on our, Paul, I don't know if this has been March 4th, did you do a public information session? Were you at the library?
Yeah, I had the office hours. Yes.
You had the office hours. Did anyone come?
One person came.
Oh, and what was, do they have? They want general information or do they have a?
No,
specific
actually,
thing?
it was the person that works for CDP doing their housing advocacy.
Okay,
And she was at the public session. So
Okay.
she's had some follow-up questions
okay,
and because they're gonna do the outreach to educate people about this, so
okay.
it's
Excuse me, Paul, on the 19th, at the planning board, the public meeting, public hearing. Will that be at 3?
4.
It's at 4.
It says 3, but it's a 4
It's at
o'clock.
4.
4, okay. 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 And we did present to the finance committee last week. They didn't, it was incredibly well received. They didn't take a formal vote because procedurally they like to vote on all the warrant articles as a bundle, so in a few weeks' time, whenever that gets presented to them, they will do that. But I would be hard pressed if anyone had an objection. I mean, it was just a very positive meeting. So we will. And does that mean we gotta go back to the finance committee on March 20th? Probably not.
No,
Okay.
they'll just
Okay.
take their votes.
We do have a meeting March 11th at 10 a.m. Is that something?
today.
That's right now, here we are.
Right now, we're in it.
Hello, man. I can't make that one.
Okay.
Sorry, we couldn't resist.
Yeah, I believe me.
Everyone
Um,
jumps on you.
I've actually got an agenda for it, but we
Well, right now.
have a meeting that and it's actually, I've asked Paul because he keeps raising things to me and he's like, we gotta deal with this next year, we gotta deal with this next year. So what I wanted to do is maybe we could schedule another task force meeting. We have to talk about what's percolating up as an agenda for next year. Think through what, we still gotta go through a select board process, but at least internally get some gut sense of what we want to achieve next year. Everyone around this table needs to do a gut check in terms of their commitment for next year. And then the final thing I want to do is, if we have a sense of the group, then think about the skill sets we don't have at this table. What I've talked to the select board, because this is not going to go through the search committee, we're a direct appointment from the select board. So I said I would like to come forward with sort of write up a job description, because I want people to be aware of, what we do, the commitment, et cetera. And then maybe potentially have some skill areas. And we can, we can have a discussion as a group about how do we recruit for that. So that's just, it's a whole discussion. So any event.
Well, we had a hold on the meeting for March 26th
Okay,
as a placeholder.
is a placeholder? Yes, I have that. So are we all good with that? March
Yeah.
26th?
I don't have a date, a time,
10 to 12?
10 to 12, okay.
On March 26th,
Yeah, and we'll try to do that full, unless there's
2 weeks from tomorrow, right?
unless there's something else popping up. I'd really like to do that, have that meeting so we can start getting our heads around next year.
10 a.m. here.
Yeah.
Also, if there's any fallout from the hearing.
Oh, yeah, yeah, right.
And I also have the 20th, the select board hearing meeting.
The 24th, they'll be discussing.
So there's nothing on the 20th?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so the 24th, they'll be talking about the warrant.
Yeah, the 20th was early on was a potential. But that kind of got,
And get rid of that.
so now it's the 24th, right?
And that'll be the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
At 5 o'clock, Paul? 5:30?
Yes.
it's not 5:30, it's not 5:30. All right. Let's see. Are there any other items not reasonably anticipated by the chair prior to this? That's our last. Any other items like to discuss? Okay. All right,
What's on the 26th then?
That's us.
That's a,
Oh, that's all.
that's to,
That's when we just put in there.
yeah, that's the one we just put in
My
there,
memory
so.
doesn't go back that far.
That's a 10 to 12.
So now we get the planning board on the 19th next week. Finance committee, that, we're pretty good with that. Then the select board on the 24th. And then after that,
Here on the 26th.
here on the 26th.
So that way, anything that comes up at the planning board
Yeah.
hearing or the select board, we can address.
Yeah, okay. Great,
Then it's April.
that's it. You do okay. If, there is no other items that people want to discuss, can I get a motion to adjourn? Second,
Second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stop recording.